Welcome to worship with Eliot Unitarian Chapel. Wherever you are tuning in from, near or far, we are so glad that you're here. I'm Eliot's lead minister, the Reverend Barbara Gadon, and I hope that this is a service that nurtures your spirit. If you are new to Eliot Chapel, we are an intentional community that welcomes all races, all genders, all sexual orientations. And we welcome people of all creeds and beliefs, all economic circumstances, and all types of families. Our vision is to create a just world through vibrant, beloved community. If you would like to connect with us and learn more about our congregation, please look for information at the end of the service. And this week, in our special UU the Vote service, we extend a special welcome to two guests. The Reverend Ranwa Hammamy is a UU Muslim minister who lives in the East Bay area in California. Reverend Hammamy directs the UU Social Justice Ministry in California. We also have with us the Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray. Reverend Frederick-Gray is our UUA president and a daughter of Eliot Chapel. Welcome to both of you.
As we light this chalice today, let us not be fooled by the smallness of the flame. There is heat to the small flame that burns and stings like our movements for justice. Through this small flame, we hear the roar of our Black, Indigenous, and ancestors of color. Yet, when we are not responsible keepers of this flame, places sacred to us and loved ones can be harmed. There is warmth to this flame that roots us in our community through all seasons. Let us remember that as we light this flame, may it not light just the flame of truth within our hearts, but may it light that prophetic fire that moves us to bold action this season and beyond. May it be so.
Once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide. In the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side, then to stand with truth is noble when we share its wretched crust, ere that cause bring fame and profit, and 'tis prosperous to be just. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. Though its portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong, then it is the brave one chooses, while the coward stands aside, till the multitude make virtue of the faith they have denied.
My name is Reverend Krista Taves. I'm the minister of Congregational Life, and I would invite you to join with me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Make sure you're seated comfortably, feet planted on the floor if you can, your hands in a comfortable position, and I invite you to join with me as you are willing and able in this prayer. Spirit of life and love, justice and peace, it is such a blessing to come together like this, week by week. We are separated physically, but we are definitely joined in heart and spirit. We need each other more than ever. We need a beloved community, anchored in covenant, because these are anxious and often infuriating times. So much makes our hearts beat quickly. So much elevates our fear, and yet so much gives us hope, even as we are afraid to hope, lest those hopes not come to fruition. For all these things that give us hope, we are thankful. But who would have thought that the end of an empire might look like this? Many of us have hoped and prayed that the worst abuses of such dominance could be undone through the transforming power of love. And yet here we see those abuses elevated through pride, selfishness, and domination. The spectacle of pride is ever before us. Indeed, pride has seldom looked so foolish and so dangerous. So many people in positions of public trust and responsibility have lost their authority, lost our confidence. But, and here is the hopeful but, the example of the humble is also before us. Indeed, humility has seldom looked so wise. So many people in positions of public trust and responsibility who otherwise would not attract our notice have gained authority and our confidence by unspectacularly acting with honor. So many have come to the streets, persisting in seeking truth, accountability, demanding that our leaders step up to their duties with courage, compassion, and moral grounding, all without centering themselves. Instead, centering the well-being of those they serve. Seldom has the contrast between foolish pride and honest humility been set so clearly before us. Come what may, O Spirit of life, may we own enough humility that we need never be humbled. May we own enough compassion that we are never tempted to humiliate. May we own enough forgiveness that neither the humbled nor the humiliators, who are all so much more, are ever outside the circle of love. Let us enter into a moment of silence for the prayers and meditations that are deep in our hearts. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. So I am so pleased that I'm here with 3 social justice leaders at Eliot Chapel. We have Steve Mennerick, Claudia Jean Potts, and Peter Wilson. Peter Wilson joined Eliot in 2012, and he first voted in 1961. Claudia Jean Potts joined Eliot Chapel in 1990 and first voted in 1972. Steve Mennerick joined Eliot Chapel in 2003, and he first voted in 1984. And I want to ask all of you, can you tell us what was your first vote like for you? Peter, what was your first vote like for you?
Oh, it was pretty exciting. I was in college, and my parents, particularly my mother, had been very active politically. So I had looked forward to that moment, and that was big.
What about you, Claudia Jean? What was your first vote like for you?
Well, I have to admit that I don't really remember very much about my first vote. And I have to say the opposite of Peter. That's because my parents never talked about voting and never talked about us becoming of voting age. And luckily, I had just gotten married 2 months before it was time for that presidential election. And so at least I had a new husband, but I don't remember what it was like.
What about you, Steve? What was your first vote like for you?
Yeah, well, like Claudia Jean, I grew up in a household where my parents didn't talk too much about voting, but my school really taught me that it was my civic responsibility to vote. I think part of the reason my parents didn't talk much about it is because my mom grew up as a Republican, my dad grew up as a Democrat, and so I think to keep their parents happy, they didn't talk too much about voting. But where I really got more motivated and formed my own ideas was when I went off to college after my first vote.
Mm-hmm. And what happened to you in college that made you more motivated?
I think it was just that, unlike in my family, there was a lot of discussion about ideas and about, and there were I met people that were from backgrounds and experiences that I didn't have in high school. And so I just was exposed to a lot of ideas and a lot of really vocal people.
That sounds like a lot like what we do at Eliot Chapel. We also love talking about ideas and we love exploring things. So for us, democracy has always been so important. It's part of our religious foundation. Voting is so important. So why is voting important to you now, Claudia Jean?
Well, I think it's very important because I didn't grow up with it being important. So I really applaud parents who are talking with their children about the importance of voting and everything. And it's interesting because I have my first memory of an election way back in first grade when Eisenhower was running against Adlai Stevenson. And I lived in Libertyville, Illinois, which was currently the home of Adlai Stevenson. And my parents, we talked about it a little bit in my first grade class, maybe because he was the hometown boy, but my parents were staunch Republicans and they didn't want to talk about it at home when I wanted to bring it home from school. And so this election has brought back that memory. And I think over the years, I've realized how much I really missed out. And Eliot Chapel has been, I've been good about, I've always voted since I could, but Eliot Chapel has really gotten me much more involved. And I think that's really important.
Peter, why is voting so important to you?
Well, particularly today, I feel like our whole democracy is under threat. Literally. And it's the vote is the most important thing we have to take on that threat. So it's just critical that everybody vote.
What about you, Steve? Why is voting so important to you?
Yeah, like Peter, I think of it as my vote being my power. It's still the case, I think, that when we go to vote, it's when everybody in America has an equal say in what the outcome is. And that's a pretty magical and powerful thing. And so I think it's really important that everybody take advantage of that power.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's what we teach in Unitarian Universalism, that we all have inherent worth and dignity. We all have an inner sense of what is right and true. And our vote is one way to cast our energy with what is right and true. So I want to ask you all too, we've been pretty busy at Eliot Chapel for the last year. We have been gearing up for You the Vote. And you all have been leaders in this in the church. And I want to hear about what we've been doing. What have we been doing to cast our vote for love? That's what this program has been called. This energy has been called You the Vote, Vote Love. So how have we been doing this here at Eliot Chapel? It's pretty exciting, actually. Steve?
Yeah, well, I'll say one thing that really has inspired me is early on in the year, we adopted one of the parts of You the Vote that involves letter writing to voters all around the country to make sure that they're exercising the power of their vote, to encourage them to go vote. And as of today, Eliot members and friends have written 1,200 letters to voters to make sure that they go out in November and think about their vote and how they're going to use their power. And to me, that's just really exciting that we've had so many people participating. It's really a case where many hands have made light work because so many people have gotten involved that we're over 1,000 letters now.
Wow.
Hopefully many more by November.
Yeah. Now, Peter, you've been doing a lot of phone banking. Tell us about that. What's phone banking like?
Well, it's changing. I think the system is generally very good, and it's very easy to do it from home or anywhere. We were in Maine on vacation, and I was doing it up there. So you get this automatic system, and it tells you who to call and the script and all that. Yeah.
So, Claudia Jean, what are you doing to help get out the vote?
Well, I've done a little phone banking, but I'm finding that challenging with my recent visual impairment. So it's easier for me to do text banking. So
right.
I try to seek out the test banking because I'm just focused on one piece of equipment and not two pieces of equipment. And I find it a little bit easier. And I've also been writing the letters. I have yard signs, and I talk to anybody I can talk to about issues.
That seems to be the most important thing. I think it's our relationships that are super, super important. And that's also the core of Unitarian Universalism, is that it is our relationships where the beauty happens and where the good happens and where creativity happens. And so I think we as Unitarian Universalists are using all of our relationships in any way that we can to bring out the vote for love. So I want to thank all of you so much. We're going to talk to you a little bit later in the service after we've listened to our messages, and we're going to talk about what we're doing next. But what I want to say to all the kids and youth in our congregation is ask your parents to tell you about voting. Learn from what they've experienced. Oh, see, that dog wants to know how we vote. So ask your parents, and parents, talk to your kids. Tell them about how important voting is. Tell them what you're reading and what you're thinking, and help your children to see this as a very, very important way that we exercise our constitutional rights, and that we have our voice, and that we use our power for good. So thanks so much. We'll be back later.
Right now, UU the Vote is working ceaselessly to build this kind of extraordinary time. Across the country, hundreds of our congregations are mobilizing volunteers in deep partnership with local and national partners. UUs have reached out to hundreds of thousands of voters with texts and postcards and calls, on track for 1 million before November. We have had deep conversations about the issues that are central to our deepest values. We are fighting voter suppression, mobilizing those who have been disenfranchised, registering neighbors who've never had the chance to make their voices heard. And we are also building power and resources and connections to face together whatever comes after November 3rd. So today, we are asking you to join with us in building this extraordinary time that we are all yearning for. And to mark this threshold year of 2020 and all the possibility and peril it represents, we are inviting every single Unitarian Universalist to help us move into the future, toward extraordinary time in November and beyond, by making a gift to UU the Vote.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we cry. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. As a song leader, one of the songs that I keep returning to, particularly in these days of uprising and reckoning, is Ella's song, written by Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan and performed by Sweet Honey and the Rock. Its lyrics, which I know some of you are already very familiar with, set to music the words of Ella Baker, an organizer, activist, leader, teacher, a prophet in the civil rights movement. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it happens. Ella Baker's words in this song are ones she wrote over 50 years ago, but they could have been written yesterday. And I'll be honest, that reality breaks my heart. It leaves me crying out, will it ever end? For some of us, that question is one that has literal life and death implications that the rest of us cannot fully know. And as much as Ella Baker's words break my heart, they also charge my spirit. Their relevance to today's manifestation of resistance and community reminds me that we are a continuation of something much bigger, much more powerful, much more incredible than this single moment in our history. Our struggles to affirm the humanity and basic rights of Black and brown lives in this country and world, they did not begin with us, and they will not end with us. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Now, I admit it took me several years of singing these words to realize that Ella Baker probably wasn't telling me, Ranwa Diop Mustafa Ta Hammamy, personally to never rest. No. In fact, none of us as individuals should be asked or expected to never rest. But all of us who believe in freedom, as a collective, as a community, we cannot rest. Ella's song, Ella's words are a charge for all of us together as a movement to never rest. We cannot stop fighting, we cannot stop creating, we cannot rest until freedom in its truest and most universal form exists in our world. Our faith as Unitarian Universalists who don't all agree on what happens after this life can all believe that what happens in this life matters so deeply that we have been called heretics, broken unjust laws, and probably gotten ourselves on more than one government list to make it known that we will not rest until freedom for every last one of us comes. And to be that unceasing, everlasting, perseverant, irritatingly prophetic movement that never rests, We need to reaffirm, deepen, and reaffirm our connections to each other as Unitarian Universalists. To remember that if we do this work together, we can not rest. And just as important, to be a true continuation of that much bigger, much more powerful, much more incredible freedom movement, we not only need to sustain our relationships within our faith, but we must build and sustain the relationships with communities and frontline liberators who have been leading the way to universal freedom for generations. We who believe in freedom cannot rest and cannot rest when we act as a truly interdependent collective. When we are carrying our load on the way to liberation, remembering that we are part of a movement reminds us that we are not carrying that load alone. Like a choir whose singers stagger their breathing to make sure a single note remains an unbroken sound, or a hospital that runs non-stop with a rotating staff, like migrating geese who take turns leading, following, or resting in their flying formation. We cannot rest, and we cannot rest until freedom comes if we sustain our connections to one another. We need each other so that when we as individuals do rest, we know our movement towards universal freedom carries on, waiting for us to return and temporarily relieve another of their liberation load. As we count down the days to Election Day, we know that no matter the outcomes, our work will continue. We will not rest. We can not rest if we take care of each other and our shared vision for universal freedom that is possible, knowing that each and every one of us is doing the same for all of us, and knowing that our collaboration in this moment is a continuation of a movement that knows there will come a day when we, all of us who believe in freedom, can finally rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore.
I was 13 years old when I became a Unitarian Universalist. I was raised in this faith, but I was 13 when I claimed it as my own. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was waiting for my parents to finish their committee meetings after service. All the other kids had left, and I was bored. I wandered into the visitor's corner, and a little red wallet card caught my eye. It said in bold letters on the front, "What do Unitarian Universalists believe?" My 13-year-old self wondered, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? As I read the 10 statements written by the Reverend David O. Rankin, in my heart, in my soul, as I read those words, I said, yes, this is what I believe. One phrase in particular planted itself in me like the deepest truth, and I never forgot it. We believe in the motive force of love. It was in that moment when I knew that this was my religion. I start with this story to ground the work of UU the Vote in our theology, which is its foundation and its inspiration. This year marks the 250th anniversary of what we celebrate as the beginning of Universalism in the United States. It was on September 30th, 1770, that Universalist John Murray preached his first sermon on this continent. And the truth that I read in that little red wallet card, the truth I've never forgotten, is the message of Universalism. 250 years ago, in the context of religious notions of God rooted in punishment, damnation, and the division of humanity between worthy and unworthy, saved and damned, the idea of universal salvation, that God's love is unconditional, that no one is cast out, and that salvation is not individual but collective, was radical and liberating. Universalism proclaimed that humanity was bound together in a common destiny, and that love is the thread that binds each of us to the other and everyone to creation. Universalists believed that God is love. They also believed in hell. They just believed that it existed here and now on the earth. The great Universalist preacher Hosea Ballou was clear about how politicians and those in power used fear, stoked fear, to protect their greed and corruption and self-interest, and he knew the suffering that resulted from that. Rather than speak of theology in terms of speculative notions of God, Ballou spoke of it in terms of human experience here and now and our relationships to each other. A society that lives out the motive force of love would be one that fosters joy and liberation and thriving for all people. This is the highest calling of our faith as Unitarian Universalists, to live out, defend, and embrace this motive force of love in our lives, in our actions, in our commitments, and in our society. This is why UU the Vote says vote love. Today, in our context, we are witnessing the emboldening and authorization of ideologies rooted not in love and interdependence, but in domination, authoritarianism, and dehumanization. And just to be clear, this is not new. It has a long and deadly history on this continent, going back more than 400 years. And yes, even our Universalist ancestors came from that same lineage of Christian European conquest and limited the vision of universalism only to white society, a limit that we are still trying to redeem ourselves from. It is dehumanization that creates systems that put children in cages, that deny health care to our transgender siblings, that allow police violence and the murder of Black people to continue unabated and without accountability. Dehumanization that allows triage protocols that devalue the lives of disabled people and that lead to systemic divestment from communities. The resources from housing to education, healthcare to jobs, and the criminalization of poverty. Just as Hosea Ballou named it, the tool of dehumanization, its propaganda is fear. Propaganda that tells us to fear our neighbor, that we are not family and kin, but enemies. This is the exact opposite of our theology of universalism that tells us that we have a common destiny and we are connected to one another in love. This is why You the Vote says vote, love, defeat, hate. And while the forces of dehumanization and domination have always been a part of U.S. history, so too have been those who have resisted and organized for the values of dignity, equity, humanity, and love. These days are heartbreaking, they're infuriating, and they're frightening. On days when I lose my own strength, I turn to the words of Alice Walker, who reminds us, we remember our ancestors because it is an easy thing to forget, that we are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. The grace with which we embrace life in spite of the pain and the sorrow is always a measure of what has gone before us. We remember our ancestors, theological, familial, and in movement. We remember Francis, Ellen Watkins Harper, Hosea Ballou, John Brown, Sitting Bull, Ida B. Wells, Dr. King, Anne Braden, and so many more whose names history does not remember. Those who struggled and risked and fought and loved for the principles of justice, equity, liberty. This is why in You the Vote, we say vote love, we say defeat hate, because, dear ones, we are on a precipice. Every single one of our most deeply held values is on the line right now. The current powers in government are showing in everything they do that the inherent worth and dignity of so many immigrants, Black people, disabled folks, trans and queer people does not matter to them. Human agency, interdependence, the democratic process are being disrupted and defiled daily. It is a radical act of faith to not only continue to believe in all of our cherished principles, but to demand them by speaking out, taking risks, organizing, leveraging our resources, and building networks of solidarity and power to protect one another and these values. We are on a precipice, and our actions right now will affect whether we have a chance to continue to bring our bold values forward, to rebuild, expand, and strengthen our democracy, to confront police violence, to upend racial inequity, to change divestment from communities, and make moves to protect the climate. Now is the time to draw on the grace, the courage, and the strength of all those who went before, to widen our comfort zones, and to do all we can to vote, love, and defeat hate. If you haven't taken any form of action yet, sign up for a shift with You the Vote. I can tell you that it's fun. And if you've written postcards to voters, but you feel nervous about phone banking, do it with your fellow UUs. And if you've been all in with You the Vote from the beginning, keep it up and start planning for how you will show up and organize after November 3rd. Because democracy will not be restored in one election. It's been under systemic attack for decades, and justice will not roll down like waters in one election. Voting matters. It's absolutely critical, but it is not the end. It is just one piece of the long haul work of organizing for a future where all are free and where all can thrive. Will you show up in the streets, set up to contribute to a bail or legal assistance fund, open your church building to protesters needing refuge from state repression, tap into your own endowment or discretionary funds to make sure that grassroots organizers have the funds they need for their work? There is so much to do, and our faith calls us to love more radically, to give more generously, to believe more fervently that another world is possible, and be willing to be all in for that future. As you've heard me say many times before, this is no time for a casual faith, no time for a casual commitment to what you hold most dear. And this is no time to go it alone. Friends, we are in this work together. I invite you to be deeper in this work of You the Vote with us. May we remember that we are held by love always. May we remember that we are held by and with one another. And may we all together be all in today, tomorrow, next month, and next year for justice, for love, for democracy, and for a future that is free and thriving for all people. May it be so.
Well, welcome back, everyone. And I loved what we just heard. And of course, it's always so moving to hear Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray, because the story she tells about becoming a Unitarian Universalist in the beginning of her message, that happened at Eliot Chapel. She became a Unitarian Universalist because of her experience in this community. And then now she's served as a minister and the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So of course, it always touches us in a special way when she speaks. But there's also just the message of how important it is to vote love, and how important it is that we stand in alignment with those who have been most oppressed in our systems, and that we use our power. So how did you feel? How do you feel as a Unitarian Universalist, having heard all of these very empowering messages? Steve?
Yeah, a lot to think about there. And overall, it just makes me want to ensure that I get out and use my power of the vote, and that I encourage as many people around me as I can to get out and vote.
What about you, Claudia Jean?
Well, I agree with what Steve said. However, I just also want to just say thank you to the people who created You the Vote, because this is a very difficult election. And people are very discouraged with many things that are happening that we have no control over. And so it has helped us to have a framework to stay strong, stay positive, stay encouraged, and make sure that we help everybody get out there to vote, because we do need our voices to be heard.
And what I find really helpful is to know that we aren't doing this alone. Every single Unitarian Universalist congregation in our country is doing what we are doing. And we are supported by the UUA. We are supported by so many leaders that we're in this together. We are living the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, which is our seventh principle. Peter, what's it like for you to know that we are working together across the nation to this end?
It's been very energizing. I mean, what UUA has done with You the Vote, I think it's pretty extraordinary. Yeah, it's energizing. It's motivated me to be out working regularly. We scheduled our fall here so that we be accessible and not be going somewhere which we normally have. So
yeah. We have no excuse to be cynical or hopeless.
Right.
None at all, because we are in this together. So Steve, tell us what's happening with all those letters that have been written to voters. This is pretty exciting.
Yeah, so Eliot Chapel members and friends have written 1,200 letters, and our partner organization named Vote Forward has recommended that we get those letters mailed October 17th, so that's yesterday. If you haven't mailed your letters yet or want to write a few, I'm sure that you could still mail them out on Monday and have them reach the voters at just the right time to encourage them to get out and vote.
And I'd also encourage us to to be watching all the communications that are coming out of Eliot Chapel, because we haven't stopped. There are text banking parties, there are phone banking parties, and we're also developing election day voter engagement strategies that we'll be part of. So have a look, join us. We would love to have you join us. We are going to continue advocating for justice, equity, and compassion, for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We will continue moving forward. Thank you, everyone.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Spirit of life and love.
We have faced uncertainty before.
We have weathered storms.
We have been consumed by flames.
We have risen like the phoenix from the ashes.
And we will again.
We the people.
May we remember our shared humanity.
Our universal kinship, our interdependence.
Breathing in love and breathing out peace.
May we recognize the spark of the divine inside all of us.
As we work to move forward together.
We the people.
Seeking that which unites us.
With our arms reaching out wide.
For the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
May love prevail in the name of all that is holy. So we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the energy of action. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.